What is going on, guys? It is Zigzag here and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be taking you guys through my top 10 countries that I would love to have added to Geoguessr. So let's hop on over to Wikipedia here, and Wikipedia will show us the list of countries that are currently covered in Geoguessr, the countries that you can possibly get in official coverage. Right, so you can see it's most of Western Europe, in fact pretty much all of Europe, all of North America minus the Caribbean and Central America, and most of South America, only a bit of Africa, and about half of Asia, and basically no Pacific Islands. So that's what we're dealing with currently. So I'm talking about all these countries in green and grey, the ones that aren't covered, and I'm going to be taking you through my top 10 picks for which I would most like to see added. And basically I'm just trying to pick based on, which ones are going to provide a lot of landmass normally and some really interesting scenery or culture, stuff that we don't really have in Geoguessr right now. One thing I forgot to mention is that there's actually pretty much no plans to cover any countries in the future for Google. They've pretty much stopped it and they're outsourcing it to third parties with much lower quality cameras. So hopefully they change their minds, because I would really love to see some new countries in Geoguessr. So first off, my number 10 pick is Morocco. So Morocco, obviously one of the wealthier African nations, one of the more built up ones. So if we hop on over here, you can see that Morocco actually has a big area of urban land here, and is just really interesting because it kind of combines a bit of European culture, a bit of African culture as well, and actually has some really beautiful spots as well. That's something I've noticed about Morocco when I play rounds there from unofficial coverage. So when I think of Morocco, I think it's a pretty cool place, and interesting architecture, kind of something that we don't really see in Geoguessr elsewhere. My number 9 pick is Fiji. Now, I just wanted something from the Pacific Islands. I think that's one of the areas in Geoguessr that's really lacking. It kind of just feels like the whole continent of Oceania, outside of Australia and New Zealand, got skipped. And so Fiji, it would just be a great place to look. Just look at this. It's very lush. It's interesting. It's not a place in the world that many people get to visit. And I think that's one of the great things about Geoguessr. You get to go places that you wouldn't normally. And yeah, just check it out. Wouldn't you like to have this in official coverage? I certainly would. And if we hop on over into maps here, then you can see that Fiji is actually one of the bigger Pacific islands. So it's actually pretty substantial. I think there's about 800,000 people in Fiji. So would definitely be one of the better Pacific islands to include, and also, just a really interesting nation in general. So let's hop on over to my number 8 pick. My number 8 pick is Cuba, and it's another one of these regions, the Caribbean, that's been largely left out of official coverage. So we have a bit of the Dominican Republic, and a little bit of Puerto Rico and whatnot, but there's really a lack of good coverage over here. And what better country would there be to do than Cuba? Obviously, Cuba is one of the biggest nations in the Caribbean. Check it out. It's pretty much a whopping landmass compared to most of the other island nations here. And of course, for political reasons, this one's never going to happen. But I'm just saying, what 10 countries could we add today that would make Geoguessr much more fun? And Cuba has to be one of those. Havana, like a really interesting historical city, and just the whole island would be really, really interesting to have. Not really a place I know too much about, but I know I would definitely like to take a look around here. Just look at the architecture, and you have all the classic commie cars on the road. It would just be a great place to see covered on Geoguessr, and so fun to guess inside, I imagine. Okay, so number 7, I think I'm still right with the numbers here, is Saudi Arabia. Now, Saudi Arabia, I admit, probably not the most beautiful country in the world, mostly desert. Also, probably, you'd just have a lot of rounds on highways between the bigger cities. But I just think it's a big enough country and a significant enough country, especially culturally and in world politics, that you really have to have a country like that from the Middle East going in, I think. So we have a bit of the UAE, so I imagine Saudi Arabia would be quite similar to guessing in the UAE. But I want more of that part of the world included in the game, and why not Saudi Arabia, one of the biggest ones, one of the most influential ones. And you have some really big cities, like Riyadh, where you're going to have really interesting rounds, I imagine. And just more of the Arabic-speaking world, I think, would be a great inclusion, especially a big country like Saudi Arabia. Okay, so number 6, I went with Nepal. Now, Nepal is a bit of an oddball so far out of the countries I've picked, because it is quite a bit smaller, right? Nepal, probably, I don't really know how many people live there, but definitely one of the smallest countries I've talked about so far over here. And we already have Bhutan. Unfortunately, a lot of the Bhutan coverage got replaced by some worse coverage. But anyway, over in Nepal, about double the size, but the mountains are truly incredible. It's going to be like another Bhutan, and already Bhutan is one of the funnest countries just to look around. Bit hard on the guessing side of things, but one of the best ones to look around. And Nepal would just be another example of that, I think. You know, you've got the tallest mountains in the world. You've got really interesting architecture. That's another thing about Bhutan that's so great. Obviously, in this city here, you can't really see much of the kind of rural architecture, but this is just one of the examples of some of the coverage we have. But, you know, we got the red number plates. It's a very interesting part of the world. And just imagine being able to have rounds where you could see, you know, the mountainscapes of Nepal in the background. It would just be absolutely sick. So, yeah, let us move on to my number 5 pick here, and it is Kazakhstan. So maybe a surprising pick for some of you guys, I'm not sure, but Kazakhstan actually does have Yandex maps here, so you can actually go and explore a bit of some of the post-Soviet nations on this site. I'll link it in the description. But check it out, Kazakhstan, one of these massive countries that just has no coverage. Probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest country that doesn't have Geoguessr coverage on the Google Maps. So yeah, it's just one of these big countries that I think would be really advantageous to have, would just expand, you know, the Russia kind of, the Cyrillic speaking parts of the world, and would also kind of have that Central Asian culture that we get a bit of in Kazakhstan, in Kyrgyzstan, but obviously Kazakhstan, a much bigger country, more populous, and so I think just a really interesting kind of developing part of the world that would be really cool to have on Geoguessr for sure. So yeah, go check this one out, and let us move on to my number 4 pick. Okay, for number 4, we are in Tanzania. Tanzania, I've already mentioned on my Q&A, is one of the countries I would most like to visit in the world. And check it out. Here we are in the bustling streets of Tanzania. I mean, it is a place with a lot of cities and a lot of things going on, and just a really interesting mix of cultures, obviously like quite religiously diverse, and yeah, just a very, very interesting place. I mean, just look at how much is happening on the streets right here and tell me you wouldn't want Street View here. I think it would be one of the countries that I would most like to see. Another thing with Tanzania, of course, is that you'd have the Mount Kilimanjaro National Park and just all these places that stretch out to border a lot of important African nations: Rwanda, Burundi, Zambia, Malawi, Mozambique, all these places that we haven't seen much of in Geoguessr at all. And yeah, I just think it would be great. We'd also have Zanzibar, which would be another cool element of it. And yeah, I just think Tanzania has to be one of those, has to be probably my top African pick for countries I would like to see in it. Morocco, Tanzania, they're my 2 in Africa that I would really like to see get added. Okay, number 3 might be surprising to you guys, but it's actually going to be Georgia. Now, the Caucasus, I think, are some of the most beautiful places in the world. So I'm talking right here about Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan. They just have these beautiful mountains and terrific climate, and also they're so like mysterious. Like, not many people in the Western world, I feel like, know too much about these 3 nations, and Georgia, I guess especially, but I don't know, it just seems to have a really interesting culture. You know, they got this crazy script. I would really like to see all the different clues that would be included in this part of the world, which is, you know, so hidden to many people. And I think that's why I've put it so high on the list, if you understand me, because yeah, I just think it would be so interesting to be able to guess in this part of the world. Obviously, it would connect Turkey and Russia, so that we kind of have the band of nations through there. And yeah, I just think that would be so fun to have these ones. Again, I'm a bit of a sucker for the mountains, if you haven't noticed, but yeah. Okay, so moving on to the next one, and we are on number 2, and of course, my pick is going to be India. Now, this might not be a big surprise to you, although it might be, because there is a little bit of coverage in India already. But what I think about India is that it is just such an interesting country. So many languages and bits of culture and climates, all this stuff in India that we are missing out on due to the fact that it doesn't have Street View. I mean, you would have to learn so much to be a good India player, I feel like, because there's so many different cultures, languages, all this kind of thing. Yeah, all these mega cities as well. I mean, the tight alleyways, you know, and then the interesting parts of just the rural life in India. I think it has to just be one of the most interesting ones due to the fact that there is so much going on there, so many people. And yeah, especially when we're considering that Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, even Bhutan have a bit of coverage, it does feel like a bit of a shame that India misses out so badly. So yeah, that I would definitely say India has to be my number 2. And therefore, it might be no surprise to you that number 1 is China. Here we are on Baidu Maps. And again, when we're talking politics here, there's a lot of stuff going on in China. It does not seem as if we're going to get Google Street View cars in China anytime soon. But here we are on the streets of China, and this has to be the one nation that I would like to see easily the most, because look at the road system in China. Look how many massive cities we're missing out on. Again, if you come out this direction, many different cultures as well, climates, you name it. And it's just one of these countries that's so quickly developing, so many interesting things to see. I love watching like YouTube channels on China where they're exploring the nation, and I just think it's absolutely fascinating. So yeah, China has to be number 1. What I would love to see is if these maps, Baidu Maps and even Yandex Maps that they used for the post-Soviet nations, get integrated into one like map guessing game where it uses Google and the others as well to give you maximum Street View coverage. I think that would be really cool. But actually, the quality here is not too bad, and actually there is plenty to see on the streets of China as my game freezes. But yeah, I think it would just be so cool to have China on there. I mean, yeah, it just comes down to these 2 countries that would add so much, because there are so many people, so many cities, and yeah, if they were part of it, then we'd have something to rival the big nations, the USAs, the Brazils, the Russias. We'd have kind of the full set of the biggest nations and most important nations in the world. So that pretty much wraps up my top 10. I would love to hear in the comments what countries you would like to see covered in the future, and unfortunately, though it doesn't seem like that will happen, hopefully maybe even the fact that the Geoguessr community comes together and says, hey, we'd actually like to see more. You never know with these things. I mean, surely it doesn't cost that much to cover a country, and yeah, imagine a world in which we had China and India in Geoguessr. That would be truly something else. The game would be a lot more fun in my opinion. Obviously, people have gotten pretty good, and I think they'd like to go further with what they are learning. So that is pretty much it for the video, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Yeah, just put it down in the comments. Tell me what you'd like to see out of in the future, and let me know what you thought of the video as well. Like and subscribe if you did enjoy the video. Thank you for making it to the end as well. And yeah, I'll see you in a video very soon. Catch you later.